Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's workshop with Ontario Cycling and the Biking Lawyer, titled Knowing Your Rights. My name is Chris Baskies, and I am the Club Relations and Membership Manager for Ontario Cycling. For those of you that are on this webinar right now who are not Ontario Cycling members, Ontario Cycling is basically the ministry recognized provincial sport organization or governing body for the sport of cycling in the province of Ontario. We have, as of last year, over 9,500 members across the province, which participate in anything from your local club ride to a provincial level event, as well as those who go on to represent Canada at either international events like the Olympics and World Championships as well. So, you can likely find an appropriate activity for your cycling interest within the province here in Ontario. So first off, before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that I'm hosting this portion of the webinar from Ottawa, which is located on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed, and its tributaries. I honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory, and Ontario Cycling does extend its deepest respect to all First Nations peoples, both past and present, as the custodians of the beautiful land that we reside on. Next, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items for tonight. Because of the large group that we have here, I ask that everyone on tonight's webinar, please ensure that your microphone is muted. We've also helped take care of that for now. If you do have a question throughout the presentation, you can either raise your hand at the bottom by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, or you can type it into the chat. There will be a Q&A session at the end, but our guest speaker is more than likely to ask for questions throughout, so we will control those on our end here. So we do have a number of the questions that you did submit in advance, but if you have a question that comes up tonight, feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. To ensure that we do remain on schedule, we're going to limit some of the questions that were specific to Ontario Cycling membership insurance coverage. If you do require more information on that, you can check out our website, ontariocycling.org, under the membership tab, and find a lot of information there, or you can contact our office, as well as anyone who is a member or is looking to become a member and wants to know more about the insurance program. We do have a webinar on April 4th with our insurance broker open to all members that will be emailed and out and posted on our social media channels in the coming days. So without further ado, because not everybody's here to hear me, I'm happy to introduce our highly regarded guest speaker for tonight. David Shellnutt is the managing partner of the Biking Lawyer LLP, which is a law firm dedicated to assisting injured cyclists and other vulnerable people. They have offices in Toronto and Hamilton, and 3 lawyers who specialize in cycling law. The Biking Lawyer LLP have a demonstrated commitment to community safety. Through direct advocacy and free workshops like the one we are here for tonight, the Biking Lawyer LLP aims to empower cyclists across Ontario and stand handlebar to handlebar with them. So everyone, please welcome Mr. Shellnutt. And David, we're happy to have you here tonight.
Thanks so much, Chris. Pam, Patrick, Ontario Cycling, very stoked to be here, and like such a great turnout for everybody being here. Maybe we should pick a bike lane in a municipality that we want, and I'll just write a letter instead and get these numbers and really bother our local councillor. It's with community like this that we empower each other, and so I'm really glad to be here with you all. Ontario Cycling has really shone a light recently, and we're super excited to work with them. They provide access and accessibility to sport cycling, and a great view into it for people who are maybe not as familiar with it as others. So definitely check them out, follow them on all their socials. It's a great view into what's going around the province right now and all year in cycling. We're big fans for sure. If you haven't been out to the track in Milton, you got to go. Okay, gonna do a presentation that we call a Know Your Rights workshop. It's something that our team has put together after years of working with people who have been in collisions. And so this presentation is based on their stories and experiences, but it's also based on my own. May 2019, I was hit in a painted bike lane. And so I'll interweave some of that into this presentation to show you some of the things I did right and some of the things I did wrong. It's light on the law. I want to hit you with practical information that you can put in your back pocket or your backpack and have it there, but never use. We're not going to sit here and speak ad nauseum about legislation or this kind of thing. We focus exclusively on what to do if the unfortunate occurs and you're involved in a collision. But rest assured, on our website, our blog, we have a library of information from everything from getting municipalities to clear the snow out of bike lanes to what to do if there's a hit and run scenario and our thoughts on bike insurance, which links back to the Ontario Cycling webpage on that. If something isn't covered tonight, you know, for sure it's on there. We produce a lot of material. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so how to go is we'll explain what to do if the unfortunate occurs, the immediate aftermath. We'll talk about what's available to you in the short, medium, and long term following the crash, and then we'll have this Q&A, which personally I find the most rewarding from these sessions. It's us speaking to each other and sharing experiences across the province that really like gives us the information we need. We'll say that, you know, this workshop is, we represent individual injured cyclists, but a big reason for why we exist is to always be pushing for safe streets and community awareness about rights. So this workshop part and parcel of that. We do free ones across the province year after year. So if you like what you see and you want one in your community, for sure reach out and we can set that up. Okay. I also explained that how I present and how the law works on paper is different than how it can play out in reality. So how the insurance company is supposed to act may be different in how they treat you. You know, we see them sometimes approve payment of bike damage in the around $10,000 bikes, and then we see them quabble over a $700 city bike that you would ride around. So there's all these differences in how things are supposed to be and how they actually are. But we'll help to give you some tips at the end about how to navigate that. And of course, the systemic differences and inequities that are everywhere in our society are also a factor when dealing with a bike crash and the post-crash world. Things like race, things like your race, gender, class, religion, economic status. This all plays into how you could be treated by everybody from police to lawyers to insurance companies. We'll talk about a bit more about that at the end. Crashes happen. It's critical to be prepared. Step one, if you're able to, take a breath, ground yourself, and see if you can get off the road to safety. We want to avoid secondary injury at all costs. If you're unable to get off the road yourself, kindly ask a bystander to help you. If that's not safe and you're not able, and you shouldn't move off the road, then please ask people to block the road. And make sure that you're safe when you're there. If you come across, a lot of this is if you come across another cyclist who's been in a collision, these are things that you can do to help. I know at the University of Toronto, I came across a cyclist who had gone down on a turn and was concerned about his knee being injured, and so didn't want to move. So I put my bike up to caution traffic around me. So these are options, but get safe in whatever means, whatever way that is. maybe one of the most important things is document, take pictures of everything. I mean, if you're able to take a picture of the vehicle license plate, first and foremost, then start taking pictures of the driver's license, the driver's insurance card, any damage that has been done to the vehicle, your bike, or your clothing. Start taking pictures of the surrounding area. We have a case of a client where a truck was illegally parked at the end of an intersection, or and the cyclist had to go around that truck that was legally parked, and on the angle that they were forced to do that, hit a streetcar track, went down, and then hit the parked car. So pictures from the scene and video, which I'll get to next, demonstrated that there was a no parking sign there, and we clearly could give that to the insurance company and say, listen, this isn't a fault discussion, because it's quite clear that your person was in the wrong. So gather all that kind of information. From my own personal experience, this is one of the things I did right. I took a breath, realized that I could get off the road safely, and I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of all the things I let you know, and then interestingly and importantly, I took a picture of how the driver I was in a painted bike lane, and we proceeded to an intersection. There was a car beside me with no indicator on. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to proceed straight through, thinking that they're not going to turn. Well, in fact, as many of us know, they did turn without indicating or checking their blind spot. And I hit the backside of the vehicle and went down pretty hard. And so the picture that I took that was really important is my drop bar had left a big black mark across the backside of the person's car. Now, I put those pictures away, and years later, when the court case was on, the driver pulled out pictures and said, well, this crash didn't happen like Dave said it happened. We were at a stop, and Dave just biked into me and sort of fell over. And here's pictures of my car at the police station the next day. And sure enough, that car had the black mark cleaned right off it. He had gone and tampered with evidence before going to the police station. And I can assure you that quite quickly after that, the case resolved, because their client was a liar, and I had some pretty good on-scene evidence. And I had no idea that they were going to do that. On scene, they were polite and kind. They asked me if they could take me to the hospital, and there's no indication that they would concoct this story. Even offered their information, easily, and said to keep them posted. It was only later when I said, hey, I think I'm more injured, by text. I think we should both report this at our respective collision reporting centers. It's something that happens to people when they think that they're going to get in trouble for a car collision, that the calculus changes and they start behaving really weird. Surprise, you're probably not going to get in trouble. It's no great secret that people who injure pedestrians, cyclists, other vulnerable road users behind the wheel do not get the kind of penalty that you would expect for causing life-changing injuries. That's something we'll get to in the questions, I'm sure. Take pictures, everything. In a hit and run scenario, if you ask to make sure that witnesses got the license plate, we have a case recently where the driver intentionally hit our cyclist client off the road, and it was pedestrians up the road who noticed the sort of bizarre behavior and took the license plate down as the car sped away. Critical. So in a hit and run situation, that's really important. And you can also look to see, okay, what mom and pop convenience store is there? What other building? I mean, I'm looking out my window of my office right now and I see 1, 2 cameras, video cameras that would have recorded an incident that had happened here. So gather that kind of information as well. Check out our hit and run blog. We've got all the how-to on that. Number 3, call authorities down to the scene. In most municipalities in Ontario, if there's been a collision with a vulnerable road user and a motor vehicle, authorities have to attend. I often hear things from fellow cyclists like, well, I didn't want to pay the ambulance bill. And fair enough. No one wants to, if they're not injured, cough up $45 and worry about not ever getting that back. You will get it back, whether you're at fault or not for the collision. And an ambulance that bill will be sent to the insurance company that's responsible, and it'll be reimbursed. No questions asked. Call the ambulance down there. This is one thing that I did not do. So I'll get to that. But another thing that I hear from cyclists is that I didn't want to spend 3 or 6 hours in an emergency room. And fair enough. The province has really let our healthcare system languish throughout and post-COVID. And so wait room times can be long. But think of the opposite. You go home and the next day you realize, maybe I have an injury. That's a bit more serious than I thought. Okay, well, now you have to go to your walk-in clinic or your family doctor. That's an hour and a half if you can get an appointment. And that family doctor can't tell you if you have a broken arm because they don't have an x-ray machine on site. So then you got to go the next day or whenever you can get an appointment to the ultrasound clinic or x-ray diagnostic place and get images there. They can't tell you what the results are. So you have to go back to your family doctor for those. So that whole run around and time spent doing that could have been saved by going to the emergency room. Most of us riding bikes are not, by percentage, are not healthcare professionals. So you won't be able to self-diagnose whether you're injured at the scene. And even if you are, you're in shock, and you should not do that. Often authorities, when you call them, will say, are you injured? And that'll sort of determine how quickly they come to you, or if at all. And my recommendation to cyclists is, you're in shock, so tell them you're not sure. I've been hit by a motor vehicle. I think I'm in shock. I'm not sure if I'm injured. I would appreciate someone getting down here and have them come down here. We pay taxes for these services for these situations. It's really important that you go get checked out. Better to get the all clear than to do what I did. I biked home, and once the adrenaline wore off around 4 or 5 in the morning, I realized I was in significant pain, and I went to the hospital and found out I had a broken wrist and elbow. I could have caused real damage there, and so I didn't follow my own rules, and that was a mistake. So I'm here to tell you to learn from that. Get them to come down. Especially, we see a lot is that cyclists will be wearing a helmet and hit their head and don't think that there's a concussion possible, and it'll come a few days later. And that those few days and not addressing a potential concussion or getting a medical doctor to look at it and diagnose it is really important for your overall recovery. Go down there, get authorities to come down and seek medical attention. Another thing about the authorities part that sort of is a thread that ties through all of this is we need, for your own individual safety and health, it's important, but for our collective safety, it's important as well. Each of these reports that we do to authorities creates a data set that people like bikemaps.org and local advocacy organizations use to argue for safe and separated infrastructure. If we know that this intersection within the last 3 months has had 19 vulnerable road users collisions because they've all been reported, well, then our advocates can use that to push for safe and separated infra. So it's really important to report, for your own health, but also for our collective well-being. So please keep that in mind too. Oh, there we go. Contact us. We have an easy reporting page on our website, or a lawyer that you trust. Check out our site for the crash report. It'll prompt you for things that you need to enter. and is about 5 pages less of information than some collision reporting centers. So it's good at the scene to access and enter. And how we enable that quickly and easily and is through our biking lawyer crash cards. Now Ontario Cycling has one as well that we've co-branded with them, and then we have ours here. If you're an Ontario Cycling member, you can get one of these. If you haven't already, no problem. If not, reach out to us and we'll send you one in the mail, or you go to your local bike shop because we've sent them to every bike shop in Ontario. If they don't have it, tell them to get us to send them to you. And it's kind of acts as a refresher on what I've just said through this part here. On the one side, it gives you the 4 things you need to take down and remember. But on the other, which is most important, is it's got a QR code to an online report. And on that online report, you enter the 4 things you need to take down, which would be critical. You can even take a picture of the dummy's license plate that hit you, and it emails you on scene. So you have all that stuff in your back pocket, and then you can focus on dealing with police or ambulance attendants. So make sure you get your crash card either through Ontario Cycling or through us. Put in your back pocket, never use it. Okay, so the immediate crash has happened. There's 2 roads you go down as a cyclist in the immediate to longer term aftermath of a crash. And the first is one of the things that I find most cyclists aren't aware of is no fault accident benefits. Many of us bike for transportation, for work. We don't have cars, or we're not reading the fine print on our insurance policies if we do. And so Ontario has set up this grand bargain where all people involved in collisions with motor vehicles, be it pedestrians, cyclists, passengers, or other drivers, have automatic access, whether they were at fault or not, to accident benefits. And you apply within 30 days of your collision. If you're able, there's extensions if you're not, if you're hospitalized. And you can access benefits such as physiotherapy, massage therapy. You can get PSW supports at home if your injuries are more serious. There's lost wages supports up to $400 a week, and caregiver benefits if you're responsible for looking after a loved one who's elderly. These benefits are critical to access, and they sort of have 3 categories. And no matter what category you may find yourself, you access them. You have to. So the first is what they call minor injuries. That's like sprains, strains, and whiplash from being in a collision. They offer $3,500 in medical benefits. Plus, if you're off work, you can get wages there too. I really recommend. We get calls all year from cyclists who thankfully just have sustained minor injuries. Still access that. It's a simple application. You send it to the insurance company, and you access medical care to get you back on the bike quicker than you would have if you didn't get any physio. Access it. It's there for you to do so. The next category is larger injuries, and that's things like broken wrists or concussions or psychological injury, and then you can access up to $65,000 in medical care. For my incident, I had that broken wrist and elbow, and over the course of about 2 years, 3 years, my accident benefits insurer had paid me about $20,000 in medical rehab benefits. And that really helped. I'm back on my bike today. I love cycling again. So do access it. The third category, which we won't go into, is for catastrophic impairment benefits. It's coverage up to $1 million, and it's for very serious injury. Before I get to the tort and civil law claims, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because it's law, the interesting thing about accident benefits is that if you're a cyclist, like I was, but you have car insurance, because like I have my car to go visit my mom in Guelph. Even though I wasn't driving my car at the time of the collision, I still make the application to my car insurance. Because it's no fault, it is just the insurance company of first resort that you go to. If you have a work car, you would go to that insurance, even if you weren't driving it. So not only was I not at fault for my collision, I wasn't driving my car, I was nowhere near me, but my car insurance still paid for my benefits. It doesn't increase your deductible, or sorry, there's no deductible kind of scenario. It doesn't increase your rates or anything like that. It's part of a grand bargain. So keep that in mind. If you don't have car insurance, then you can access it through the driver's policy. Okay. Thankfully, if it's a hit and run scenario and you can't get any policy to respond, the provincial government has the Motor Vehicle Accident Claims Fund, which is the payor of last resort, and they will cover the same benefits as your own car insurance would have if you had it. So accident benefits, we've got a blog for that. So like check it out for more information. But it's a really critical piece in you getting the recovery support that you need to get back on the bike. And that brings us to the second road you go down if you're in a collision. And that's where someone like us would get more heavily involved. Of course, we help out with accident benefits claims as well. This is where you in a more traditional sense, you sue the driver for negligently causing you harm. In Ontario, as part of this grand bargain to get the accident benefits kick in right away, you can only sue then if you've suffered a permanent and serious impairment. And that's an injury that lasts forever and affects your ability to work, live your life, care for your kids. So you're only pursuing a claim if you can demonstrate that. There's different heads of what we call damages for pain and suffering, and income loss. And this can be very long term. If you have a physically demanding job and you suffer an interarticular injury in a joint that prevents you from doing that, or say you have to retire early because you have early onset arthritis as a result, well, then your lawyer will help you calculate, okay, what's the 5 years of retirement? What's that in income? And then the defendant would be on the hook for that. It also can cover medical care costs above and beyond the accident benefits coverages that are available. And there's claims that can be made for family members as well. Unfortunately, we represent some families who've lost loved ones as a result of road violence, and so those families can make claims. Told you I was going to be light on the law, and we're going to get into the questions, because I think that's like where a lot more help is going to come. I just want to reiterate that there are systemic differences and challenges that people will face, and we've spoken a lot with our clients who are non-white men like me about how you navigate. What are some best practices? And so often what we hear is, especially in dealing with police or medical staff, have a buddy there. Have an extra set of ears and eyes to advocate on your behalf. First of all, you probably shouldn't be giving any police statements or anything like that in the immediate aftermath of the crash, because you may be in shock, you may be concussed. And so you want your buddy there to say, listen, they're highly medicated right now. We shouldn't be discussing what happened here. It's not appropriate. And often we see on the hospital side of things, people with sort of a multitude of injuries, the orthopedic objective injuries getting the most attention, which totally makes sense. Okay, there's a broken arm that requires surgery. They're focusing less perhaps on what might be a mild concussion, but you want someone there to advocate for you to say, hey, listen, Jeremy is forgetting things when I'm speaking to them and not communicating properly. I think you should check this out. So that's really important. In navigating the insurance companies, the same challenges will be there. And so with that, we say hire a lawyer that you trust. And I know that's a problem too, is that there's a distrust of lawyers in the legal system, rightfully so. And so, we recommend, who would your loved ones go with who may have experience with this, who's active in the community and actually gives a damn about the community. So keep those things in mind. And always, like we said, always speak to a lawyer. It's free. All personal injury lawyers, which cover these kind of cases, will give you a free consultation. We're not in the business of stringing people along. If you don't have a claim, we're going to tell you, apply for your accident benefits, get your minor injuries covered, and then we'll shake your hand and you have a good day. There's no interest in you or for us to proceed if there's no claim there. So call a lawyer, get an honest opinion. In closing, just be sure to check out all the resources that we provide. We've got our Instagram, which has a ton of links to our blog. It also has guides to cycling with police, cycling and police. Our local bike shops have posters we've created talking about what kind of items on your bike are necessary to avoid tickets and fines, but which are also safe. And this kind of presentation is in our crash guide too, so you can check that out too. That's it. Let's hammer some questions. How we throw it to you folks?
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. So there's only a couple of questions in the chat right now, but if anybody does have one, feel free to either type it in the chat or click the raise hand button. I'll ask a question that came in advance. What would be your suggestion to people who are involved in a crash where the police are on site and they feel like they might be dealing with somebody a police officer that might be more hostile than they are friendly? Do you have any suggestions for the individual in that case?
It kind of ties into, thanks Chris, it kind of ties into what I was just saying. Having that buddy there in that situation can really help. It's an extra set of eyes and ears and an extra person to sort of bear witness. There are some good officers out there who really help our clients out, but frequently we see the same biases against cyclists that you will see cycling on the road permeate through our police services. Drivers are constantly undercharged, if charged at all. We've got pretty clear vehicular assault cases, which police will say, well, that's they just did a improper lane change or something like that, and we'll have to do some direct advocacy to get it bumped up. I would say this: if you're on scene and a police officer is being hostile, take every effort to de-escalate the situation and/or get out of there to somewhere that's safe. No one ever talked a police officer that I'm aware of into upping a charge on somebody or seeing things in the cyclist's favor. So better just to document as well as you can what happened, get the officer's information and that kind of thing. If a situation comes up like that, we obviously specialize in cycling law cases, but we do a fair amount of police work, as you may have seen, and advocacy as well, as you may have seen in our efforts in High Park this summer. So you give us a call if they're giving you any trouble. I will talk about this police and the cycling guide as kind of a segue. We have this guide and what you should do in an encounter if a police officer pulls you over on your bicycle. And people constantly, everybody, a lot of people ride with their wallet and the driver's license and things like that, but you do not have to provide any of that. You do not need a license to bicycle. So if an officer pulls you over, all you are required to do is to state your name and your address truthfully. And then following that, I would say, sir, am I being detained? Sir, am I being charged? Am I free to go? And then get out of there. We have seen people wrongfully present their license and then get a failure to yield ticket and then get demerit points on their car, on their through their car license. This shouldn't be the case, and I'm sure you could win on appeal that it's unfair. But think of the time and money that would cost. Simply say your name and your address truthfully, And that's all you got to do.
Perfect. Thanks, David. One of the questions that came up prior to the chat and also has kind of come up within the chat here is about if there's a difference between if there is a crash between cyclist and cyclist and pedestrian, or cyclist and automobile, and if there's any difference in, protocol or approach that somebody should take.
Yeah, so we don't represent against cyclists, but I will talk sort of tangentially about it. If there's a collision between a motor vehicle and a pedestrian or cyclist, then what we've talked about, the accident benefits apply. If it's two vulnerable road users against each other, or someone's dog comes out and causes you to fall, well, then it's just traditional negligence, and the normal rules apply. It's the same thing. You have an obligation to stick around, make sure the person gets medical attention, and to share information if something has happened. You really want to do this and get more than just a name and a phone number. You want to take a picture of their driver's license, because if you are seriously injured, you're going to want to be able to find out if they have insurance that you can get to cover those injuries, or assets that can be helpful as well. I can say that the incidence of pedestrian on cyclist crashes or cyclist on cyclist crashes is like what we know from Toronto police data. From 2012 to 2020 or 2019, there were 17,000 killed or seriously injured collisions between motor vehicles, and causing motor vehicles causing those injuries or deaths. There were 6 between where cyclists caused serious injury or death. So we're talking 17,000 to 6, and that's certainly the number of phone calls we get for cyclists being hit by cars, or there versus a pedestrian or a cyclist involved as well. Maybe I'll turn to some of the, if you're going through those, maybe I highlighted some ones that we hear from people across the province. Maybe I'll grab some of those, Chris?
Sure.
Okay. What are the legal requirements for cyclist visibility versus strong recommendation? I highlighted this one because it speaks to what we've written about in our blog called contributory negligence. Now, under the Highway Traffic Act, if there is a collision between a motorist and a vulnerable road user, the reverse onus applies in the civil context. And so what that means is that the driver will have to prove they were not at fault for the collision and demonstrate that the cyclist or pedestrian had done something to contribute to it. And so that's where we see things like visibility coming up in the legal context. It's where you could have done something that would have mitigated the impact of the collision. And so there's a famous case from Aurelia where a police officer hit a cyclist in a crosswalk. And so you're not allowed to cycle in a crosswalk. That's against the law. The cyclist didn't have lights on and it was at nighttime. So that's illegal as well. And the cyclist was wearing, and the judge said that the cyclist was wearing all dark clothing and was also intoxicated. So those things, including the visibility, were factors in reducing the cyclist's award. Now, the judge didn't throw out the case and say, oh, you didn't have a light, so you're totally at fault. Because you can't just drive down the street and hit people in crosswalks, whether they're biking all in black or not. You have the onus of responsibilities on the motor vehicle. Now, all those things the cyclist did went to reduce their damages award by 50%. Okay, so we recommend cycling defensively and doing things that will keep you safe. Now, we all know that wearing a high vis vest is not going to protect you from a motorist that's on their phone or fails to check their blind spot, like what happened to me. But if there are steps you can take that can sort of lessen those situations, then we recommend it. I do cycle in my black North Face jacket, even at night, I have a like 600 lumens light just pounding at all times. So you know, take steps to be visible for sure. And it could be used against you ultimately in a court case if you weren't. Yeah. Great question, whoever brought that one up. Another great one is how do you recommend cyclists report or follow up with dangerous drivers? Okay, we could all have a full-time job reporting dangerous drivers, right? Many municipalities across the province have an online system or an email or a phone number where you can report this stuff in. Yeah, we have a blog for that, so you can check it out and see what your city does and the steps you should take. My recommendation is this. Like I said, you could do this all day, and that really would probably be stressful for you. And not a good use of your time. What I do is I report the really egregious stuff, you know, where someone cuts me off in a really dangerous way, or especially if they work for a company and I can get that truck information, then I'll post it to Twitter and I'll file a report. So a little public shaming as well. But where someone screams out the window, get off the road, or yells expletives at me, I know that kind of person is going to hit somebody else, even though they didn't hit me. That kind of behavior leads to other people getting injured. So I report those ones, the ones that in my gut feel like it's a dangerous person. So, you know, I think there's a broader collective responsibility as well. I have to believe that reporting these people creates a mark on their record. And so that when they do ultimately hit somebody, those things can be pulled up to influence sentencing or even liability in cases like ours. There's also the data set aspect too, by showing where all these you know, conflicts happen between road users. Our advocacy organizations can advocate for changes to infrastructure that cools things down. We know that a lot of the time it's how the roads are made that puts us in conflict with each other. So yeah, check out our blog on the things you should do to report. One thing I'll say is that we see a ton of these situations go really sideways very quickly. We spoke to someone today who tapped on a vehicle that was parked in a bike lane, and that driver took after them, passed them, stopped in front, jammed on the brakes to try and make them crash. They were able to navigate around it, and then they hit them from behind. Thankfully, they weren't too injured. But that like small escalation in like telling the guy to get out of the bike lane could have resulted in serious injury or death. And what happens to people behind the wheel is sometimes unfathomable. So I get that it can be super infuriating. Like it's not uncommon for me to drop a serious F-bomb when I'm out there, but I really, having seen what we've seen, I try and like de-escalate myself first. If it's a really egregious person that's really dangerous, the first thing I do is I start saying that license plate over and over in my mind. I get off the road and I get to safety and I text it to myself, and then I can report that later. The fact that people are in 2,000-pound motorized steel boxes that can be turned against you, there's no winning in that situation. I used to work for a managing partner at a big firm downtown, who before that he had been a bike courier, and he said I would always come in first thing in the morning, commuting along Adelaide Street in Toronto before there was bike lanes, and I'm like, oh, this just happened to me. This guy was wrong. Blah 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 blah. And he's like, yeah, you're right, Dave. Just don't be dead right. So keep that in mind. Get information. Get off the road to safety. But report these jerks. Okay, a great one about, can any action be taken if there's road disrepair or say unplowed bike lanes? We have a blog for that, so please check it out, both of them. Yes, this is a case where it's really critical to gather information appropriately. Road maintenance cases are very difficult. the laws that rely on measurements of holes and imperfections that are based on what would cause problems for a car tire, not a bike tire. So you've already got an uphill battle with the way the legislation is written. If you don't gather information on the imperfection properly, it's really going to be difficult. We recommend if you're able to right away, don't wait, don't go back down later, take pictures of the hole, we'll say, but put something in there for depth. You can put in your crash card, put it in to show the depth, the height, and the width of the imperfection, because that all matters in whether you can bring a suit or not. Really critical. We had a client of ours last summer hit a pothole with a water main in it. Now they were really injured, so they were only able to take a quick picture that got like a general idea of what the thing looked like, but no measurements. And so after they were dealing with their injury, they sent a friend down there the next day, and the city had paved over it. So we weren't able to get those measurements. Now there's still a case there. It's just a more difficult one. So make sure that you get some really good measurements. The best thing is to quickly go home and get a ruler and a tape measure and really start engineering that thing. With road conditions like ice and snow, like say a private property has a broken drain leaking ice onto the roadway, which causes a hazard and you crash. These kind of things you need to report to the city within 10 days, or else you could lose the ability to claim. And even in road disrepair issues, we recommend filing within that time to a notice. It's a simple letter or a simple email to your city clerk to say that what happened on what date and where, and that allows them to gather the information that everybody will need later on. So great question for whoever brought that up. If you want to know more, check out the blog for the potholes and bike lanes. Chris, how are we doing? You want me to keep? Yeah, we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, so we have a few questions.
Nice.
One of them is about, I guess one of the questions that came up, you brought it up earlier in the example of, being chased, like, chased by a dog or whatever. So I guess the question that a few people have had is if there's no impact, let's say with, with an object other than, somebody coming close to you or, a dog chasing you, let's say, and you end up crashing, is there still recourse that the cyclist can take in that case?
Yeah, great question. It's what we call causation. Did the first incident cause you to fall, or was there some sort of interceding event? So if there was an interceding event, then no, there won't be a claim. But if nothing broke the chain of causation, then yes, the original, to keep throwing legal, the original tortfeasor, whoever's responsible for the first act, would be responsible for the injury. We've got a couple of these cases. Like I said, the person parking illegally. We have cases where a car is parked in a bike lane and cyclists will go around into the motor vehicle traffic lane and then be hit in traffic. And so in those cases, we sue both. We will sue the driver who's sitting in the bike lane that shouldn't have been there, and then the person that hit the cyclist. And for sure, if a dog came after you and thankfully didn't bite you but caused you to crash, you would sue the dog owner as well. We see that unfortunately frequently. I'm trying to think of another example of the causation question. It's frequently those bike lane parkings. That's what we see a lot. Yeah. Thanks. Good question, team.
So a question on reporting a dangerous driver. So
Sure.
what would be the process that somebody would take for that? And I guess the follow-up that came was, if you report that driver, is there any way to know that they were potentially charged?
Yeah. Shocker, they probably weren't. If police don't think it's serious enough in their mind. Okay. The same thing that we just sort of spoke about, important aggressive to drivers, do it through whatever a municipal reporting system you have. What I recommend to people is give it about 3 to 5 days and then follow up. And try and do all this by email if you can. But call in, see if there's an officer working on it. If not, ask if there will be, and then follow up, and then set for maybe 2 or 3 weeks down the line to follow up for that as well. If nothing has happened, then well, I mean, you could end up following up like my friend Tim did for months, and only to be told that no, we're not doing anything. In those cases, if you don't hear anything, get your local counselor involved. We fund police huge amounts of money, and so in receipt of that money, they ought to be responsible and responsive to us. So get your counselor involved and let them know what's happening as well. Sometimes that can exert some pressure. In some cases I've seen results. Often when we get involved and make a bit of a public stink about it, we see some results. But like I was just talking about Tim's case, he's got a video of a driver of a black pickup, obviously, driving into him at an intersection on purpose. And thankfully, Tim was able to move to the side. And then the driver sped ahead. And then as Tim went to pass, the driver on video gets out and starts to chase him. Tim followed up with TPS for about 5 months. And they ultimately said, no, we're not doing anything. So, it can be disheartening, but, like I said, pick your battles, follow up with them, let your counselor know if you get no results. And at the very least, this is again a data point for our collective safety. So, I don't know if that's a good consolation prize or not, but I have to think it is, or I'd probably be a very upset person. I want to say too, we're talking about like a lot of really negative Ned stuff here, and I don't want to be negative and a downer or anything like that. I love cycling, and even after collisions and after terrible interactions, like you could not take my bicycle away from me. It's how I get around. It's how I take my kid to school. It's how I volunteer in my community with the Toronto Bike Brigade, and I know you all love it too. So we're talking about all this stuff for our own safety and awareness. But I don't want to for a moment think that we should ever stop cycling or ever stop pushing. Write as many letters to police as you want and let them know that we're here.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, and I'm gonna slightly rephrase it potentially, is about wearing headphones, and I guess more so when you're riding. Is there a legal sort of position on that?
I used to ride with headphones. I used to not wear a helmet. I would, there's a lot of things, but I won't go into all of them. So like, I get it. I get that sometimes these things happen and people do them. All I'll say is that, we probably don't recommend it because it takes away from the awareness that you have about all the shenanigans that are going on around you. We have to be cycling defensively at all times. You got to be going out there and riding. And when you're on the roads with motor vehicles and motorists, think that either A, they don't see you, or B, they don't care. And they're going to make that turn in front of you or close past you. So adding anything that complicates that or takes or drops your awareness down, I think is a problem. And like I said, about contributory negligence, a defense lawyer would love to find out that my clients were blasting music in their ears, and would make high hay about that in a case to try and diminish the culpability of their clients. These folks are terrible. They go after every opportunity to try and diminish people's claims. People who are injured, and they've got a real bent for cyclists. So don't give them the chance.
Okay, perfect. I guess there's a question about if you do record, take pictures or have a recording of something in progress. Is it best to kind of, who would you share that with, or who would you recommend that is shared with first? Is it the police? Is it a lawyer? Is there a first step, second step that you would recommend? Or if somebody has shared it with the police and felt like they didn't get anywhere, what would your next suggestion be?
Yeah, this is like all situational, obviously. Generally, if you have video of dangerous driving, or let's talk just about collisions here, about a collision, you want to give that to authorities to make sure that they can quickly charge the driver and get that ball rolling for you on the liability side of things. Yeah, you would want to share it with your lawyer when you got one. If you don't see a lot of action from some video you've got, you flip it to us. We love to put things on Twitter anonymously and demonstrate what we're up against out there, and especially if the case has been overlooked. Many of you may have saw in January, we had a cyclist who had video of a driver purposely running him off the road, and that was given to a police officer who, like I said, only charged the driver with a failure to give the lane. And then that person gave us the video. We reviewed it and we wrote a letter to the Toronto police and said, listen, this is absolutely on purpose. And there's also a witness that thinks the same thing. If you do not press more aggressive charges against this driver, we're going to continue to see this kind of behavior on these streets. And ultimately, a detective who we'd seen do some decent work on other cases was put on the case. The other officer was tossed, and that driver was charged with three criminal counts. Put that video into the hands of someone who can maybe use it if you're getting nowhere. Speaking of video, it's like, this is a question that comes up: should I ride with a camera? Here's mine. I do, like, when I was commuting 30 minutes each way to work, especially after my collision, I used my camera for like years straight. But then I don't know if anybody's ever dealt with a GoPro. Battery sucks, and it doesn't record for all that long in terms of, because the size is so big of the file. So I kind of only record during snowstorms if I'm biking or bad inclement weather, when I know that drivers are focused on the one or two things they can handle, but not the other dozen things they ought to be focused on. So that's when I wear my camera now. In the city, I use one on the front because I find that most of the shenanigans happens up there. And so I'm gonna catch that. My dad, he's out in Collingwood, and he does a lot of riding, in Grey County up there. And so a lot of he and his friends were swiped off the road by a 90-year-old guy who should not have been driving. And they all got injured, though thankfully not super seriously injured. So after that, and because of up there, the shenanigans happens in the back, we got him a cyclist rear camera to pick up stuff coming that way. When those black pickups close past you, you want to get that license plate, and he reports it to the OPP. When it's egregious enough. Whatever camera you get, if you're able to get one, I know it's a really there's like an economic there's like a price hurdle to get over for a lot of these things. Whatever one you get, the most critical thing is that it picks up license plates. If it doesn't pick up a license plate, I wouldn't bother getting it. There's great like Reddit groups about this. Some like Toronto has a cycling Facebook group that really gets into cameras, and people know way better than me what's out there. Look into it if you're interested. If you're doing a lot of road or gravel riding, put one on the back. If you're in and around the city, get it on up in front of you. I can tell you also that when a driver sees this thing on my head, their behavior changes markedly. It's a real tool for de-escalation. I've seen that firsthand. Nicely suggesting that someone move out of a bike lane. It happens more often when I have this on. A driver who initially threatened me with assault will back down when they see this camera. So I think it's really great for de-escalation as well. Sorry, I've got this page here. Chris, there was one or two I wanted to answer. A couple of people asked, like, what's the province doing? And how best can we advocate for legislation that helps us? Okay. If all of us tonight wrote to our local MPP and said, what are you doing about the Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act? That would be fantastic. I think it's maybe now called the Moving Ontarians Safely Act, because the Conservatives have a weird way of naming things. But in any case, look up the Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act. It is critical. It is a critical piece to our overall road safety and safe street strategy. We have to send a message to drivers that if you hit someone and injure them in your motor vehicle, there will be real consequences. You will lose licenses. You'll have to do community services. You'll be retrained. There will be significant fines and possible jail time. Right now, the morbid joke is that it's not even a joke. A morbid statement that we often hear is, if you want to kill someone, you do it with your car, because you will not face consequence. And that is true. I have cyclists ticketed for speeding in Hyde Park two summers ago that were given tickets of $120. And I got a client in Guelph who a driver cut across 4 lanes of traffic, including 2 bike lanes, to get some nuggets from McDonald's, and it hit my client, who suffered a fractured hip requiring a partial replacement. And that driver got an improper lane change and a $114 ticket, less than the cyclists that were ticketed in Hyde Park for speeding. So we gotta change the laws, and that starts with the Protecting Vulnerable Road Users Act. Our friends Bike Law have really taken the lead on this, as well as the NDP. Write to your MPP, let them know you care about this thing. It's part of what we think a three-way strategy for safe streets. We need changes in legislation. We need municipalities to invest in safe, separated infrastructure. I was hitting a painted bike lane. If there was a protected intersection there and a proper bike lane, the chances of me being hit would have decreased. We need automated enforcement. We know we can't rely on police for everything. And we probably shouldn't. So we need more automated enforcement, and we need an entire cultural shift in how we view driving. We have to see it as a privilege and not a right, and one that you can lose if you use it improperly. You cannot. It's wild. You cannot run a red light or cut someone off because you want to get to Costco on time. You have got to take driving seriously, and the safety of especially vulnerable road users, but everybody out on the roads has to be paramount in people's minds when driving. So we need a cultural shift as well. Is there current data on the number of cycling collisions specific to regions of Ontario and current trends? So most municipalities actually track some decent data on this stuff. It's lags behind. a year or two, which kind of puts us in a bizarre position right now because we're looking at data from COVID, which is hard to read based on the lockdowns and things like that. But your municipality should have this stuff. Just simply Google motor vehicle collisions Hamilton data, and you'll get reports. The Ministry of Transportation should carry provincial numbers, and then there's some think tanks like bikemaps.org who have sort of data as well. Yeah, it's available, and it's I think one of our strongest tools in cycling advocacy is to use that data to make points backed with fact. So yeah, we saw like a worrying trend at the beginning of this year in Waterloo region, and there was like 9 vulnerable road users killed or seriously injured in like a week or two. And it was all happening at roundabout intersections. And so we wrote to the city and said, and police, and said, hey, this is a big problem. And here's these 9 things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. But then we used their own data from the previous 2 years to say, and this is like this is part of a broader problem. It was some crazy number that like 70% of collisions happened at these roundabouts. So like we're like, folks, you need to take a look at this. Yeah, great question. Data. Chris, we got anything there?
That's most of the generals. There's a few specific questions in terms of people's actual, like specific ones, if you wanted.
Sure, let's get into it.
Okay, so there's a question from one person here. They use a Fly 6 and Fly 12 rear and front camera, and they're wondering, based on your messaging about, you know, sharing of cam footage, they said they've sent some basically potentially life-threatening videos, though non-lethal, to police with no response, and they're wondering at sort of when they're riding, you know, who do they share those videos with and to whom? And when they're riding with their club versus on their own, who do they, you know, share those or escalate those videos to? So if they're riding on their own, who would they do it to? And if they're riding with their club, do they go through their club, let's say, or do they do the same process?
I mean, I think whether you're riding or with your club or alone, you share videos of things that are dangerous. The benefit of club riding is you may have some witnesses who can corroborate your story and speak to it. You may also be able to send a half dozen emails to your local detachment or police division versus just one email from you. You know, if 6 people saw this thing go down, I'd send 6 individual emails, and I'd probably copy my local counselor, the counselor in that region, on those emails as well. Like I said, we pay them a ton of money, but as cyclists, we don't get a lot of response. And so where you're not getting any response, you know, involve more parties. If you get a really wild video that you've shared with police that they didn't do anything about, you know, send it to local media outlets and say, listen, this thing happened. It's nuts, and no one's doing anything. Through sort of like pushing and prodding in different ways, you can see some results. It is not easy. It is an uphill battle in many cases, but we do it. We stand with you. If you need any help getting their attention, let us know. You know, we'd be happy to. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. There's one other question here about the legality behind taking the lane, and is it considered sort of defensive cycling or defensive in nature?
Right. So you know, you hear a lot about taking the lane, and you know, easier for some than others. So you know, if you hear, I often hear, well, you should have taken the lane, but that's not really practicable for everybody. So okay, the law says that you are a vehicle and can ride in a lane of traffic. However, you also have to move over to the side to faster moving traffic where it's safe and practicable to do that. So If you're riding down a perfectly clear street with no issue, in a meter from the curb, at that point, then a car's coming up on you from behind. You should move as safely to the side as you can. Don't cycle in the gutter, obviously. Number one, that's the law, but it's like also a way to de-escalate situations. You've probably all been in a situation where you've had to take the lane for absolutely legitimate reasons, and the person just lays on the horn behind you. So, moving over when it's safe to do so can avoid some of that, though we know it happens anyways. Just keep an eye on the side of the road and be safe,
Perfect, thank you. There's a few more coming in right now. Wondering, I guess a couple people have a question about two abreast cycling, and it's, when is it? I guess there's confusion about when is it legal? Is it legal?
Yeah, question we often get, and the answer is, well, it's municipal specific. So you got to check where the area you're riding. Check with the authorities in that area. We know that in Ottawa, it's explicitly permitted by police have said, do this, it is safer. We know in other areas where that is not the case. So you got to really get down to the granular and ask your local area or where you're cycling what they prefer. You may not get an answer, and in that case, it's all a safety and comfort thing. I know the arguments for riding two abreast. I totally understand and agree with them. You are the size of a vehicle and it forces a car to pass you. Only when it's not another car isn't coming. I get all that. I get if you're riding single file, they may try and squeeze. But personally, I feel sometimes I can feel a bit unsafe doing that. And I don't, and I prefer to ride single file in some areas. It's not a great answer, but just check locally, see what's allowed, what they suggest, and do what makes you feel safe and comfortable.
Perfect, thank you. There's one other question about, and maybe I'll ask if you've ever had this come up in terms of a cyclist who's dealt with a hostile driver who was actually abusive or assaulting the individual. What would you kind of recommend in that case, or where they're being threatened?
Yeah, okay, so if it's if there is threats made, then it goes back to the questions that we've answered on dangerous driving and aggressive driving. We have more than a handful of cases, some where people have used vehicles to run a person off the road or ram into them, causing them injury. We have other cases where a person has got out of the vehicle and physically assaulted the cyclist. These things happen. It's why I recommend the de-escalation technique, getting off the road, getting the plate and reporting. You can sue in those cases 100%, and we relish the opportunity. In the case of vehicle being used as a weapon, even though it was intentional, the accident benefits can apply. There's a cap on how much you can sue for if it was an intentional act. It's at $200,000, but you can still claim compensation. If the person gets out of their car and physically fights you, then the same entitlements, it's not considered a motor vehicle collision, and not there's the chain of causation that we were talking about earlier breaks, and it's not considered a car collision. So then you can't access those benefits, and you can only sue the driver. You mean it's only worth suing the driver if they have assets or some way to compensate you. This stuff happens. Scary. We see some charges. Sometimes we see undercharging pretty often too. So we push for the civil route to claim, to push for justice in that area. And even for sort of less serious assaults, if it's done behind the wheel, we'll still pursue it, because there's like a collective safety piece about it that really burns our bottoms.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions in the chat that I've got. Yeah, just for everybody here, just again, if you want to learn more about Ontario Cycling, you can definitely visit our website, ontariocycling.org. If you want to learn more about the biking lawyer, if you want to read the blog, report a crash, you can definitely visit thebikinglawyer.ca. Yeah, I don't know, David, if you have anything else you want to share before we go.
Well, I think that we didn't get through all the online questions, but
Yeah.
what we'll do, we'll work with Ontario Cycling to get those up on the website and answers to those in writing, kind of like an FAQ, because there's a lot of thought was put into it by you folks, and we want to be sure to respond. Otherwise, this is like these events are like the highlight of my day-to-day work. I wish we were all in person. But we'll see you in a bike lane and never in our office. How about?
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. Really, really appreciate you taking the time and for collaborating with us. We're so excited about what's going to happen next. So thank you so much. Very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you everyone for coming, and have a safe rest of the evening, and happy cycling.